What I'm about to tell you is a story 35 years in the making. In 1989, a young woman walked out of her apartment in a quiet Illinois town and was never seen alive again. Her family waited. The detectives searched. The evidence went nowhere. Then, in 2023, a single strand of DNA changed everything. Her name was Jennifer Marie Collins, 23 years old in the summer of 1989. She had auburn hair that fell just past her shoulders and green eyes that her mother said could light up a room. Jennifer stood 5 feet 6 inches tall and had a smile that made everyone around her feel welcome. She lived in Rockford, Illinois, a manufacturing city about 90 miles northwest of Chicago. Jennifer had grown up there, went to Guilford High School, graduated in 1984 with honors. She was the kind of student teachers remembered, always raising her hand, always staying after class to ask questions. After high school, Jennifer attended Rock Valley College. She studied nursing. It was all she ever wanted to do. Even as a little girl, she'd bandage up her dolls and stuffed animals. Her mother, Carol, kept a photo of 6-year-old Jennifer wearing a homemade nurse's cap made from construction paper. By 1989, Jennifer was a registered nurse at Swedish American Hospital in Rockford. She worked the day shift in the cardiac care unit. Her co-workers loved her. Patients requested her by name. She had this gentle way of explaining scary medical procedures that made people feel safe. Jennifer lived alone in a small 1-bedroom apartment on the east side of Rockford. The Pinecrest Apartments on Alpine Road. Unit 214, second floor, corner unit with a little balcony overlooking the parking lot. She'd moved in 6 months earlier. It was her first place on her own, and she was so proud of it. Her apartment was modest, but she'd made it home. Plants on every windowsill, photos of family and friends covering the refrigerator, a collection of ceramic angels her grandmother had given her lined the shelf above the television. Jennifer loved those angels. She told her mother they made her feel protected. She had a routine, very predictable. Up at 5:30 every morning, coffee and toast. At the hospital by 7, home by 4 in the afternoon. She'd change into sweatpants and a t-shirt, make dinner, usually something simple, pasta or a salad. Then she'd watch her favorite shows. She never missed Cheers on Thursday nights. Jennifer talked to her mother.
Rockford, Illinois, in 1989, was a city in transition. Once a thriving manufacturing hub, known for furniture and machine tools, it was struggling as factories closed and jobs disappeared. The population was around 140,000. Working-class neighborhoods, tree-lined streets, a downtown that had seen better days. The east side, where Jennifer lived, was a mix of apartment complexes, small businesses, and residential areas. Alpine Road was a busy street, 4 lanes with a turning lane down the middle, strip malls and gas stations, a grocery store, a video rental place. The Pinecrest Apartments sat back from the road behind a large parking lot. Pinecrest wasn't fancy. Built in the 70s, tan brick buildings with brown trim. 3 buildings total, forming a U-shape around a central courtyard with a small pool that was only open in summer. Each building was 3 stories, exterior staircases, metal railings painted brown. The paint was peeling in places. Jennifer's building was on the left as you entered the complex. Unit 214 was on the 2nd floor, northeast corner. You walked up the exterior stairs, turned right, and her door was the 3rd one down. She had 2 neighbors on her floor, an elderly couple to her left, a single man in his 40s to her right. Below her lived a young family with 2 kids. The area felt safe. Rockford had crime like any city, but this neighborhood was quiet. Families, working people, the kind of place where residents knew each other enough to wave hello. The parking lot had good light.
August 17th, 1989, a Thursday. Jennifer worked her regular shift at the hospital, 7 in the morning until 3:30 in the afternoon. Her supervisor later said she seemed completely normal that day, happy, smiling. She ate lunch in the cafeteria with 2 other nurses. They talked about weekend plans. Jennifer said she might go to the mall, maybe catch a movie. She clocked out at 3:32, walked to her car in the employee parking lot, a 1985 Honda Civic, blue. She'd bought it used 2 years earlier, and it ran perfectly. She was proud of that car, kept it clean, had a Garfield sunshade in the windshield. Jennifer drove home. The route was simple: east on State Street, north on Alpine Road, about 15 minutes with traffic. Security footage from a gas station near her apartment showed her car passing by at 3:58 that afternoon. She was alone in the vehicle. She arrived at Pinecrest around 4:05. A neighbor saw her parking. Mrs. Eleanor Kowalski from the building across the courtyard was sitting on her balcony and waved. Jennifer waved back. Mrs. Kowalski watched Jennifer walk up the stairs to her apartment, carrying her purse and a small paper bag, probably stopped for something at the store. Jennifer unlocked her door and went inside. That was the last time anyone saw her alive. What happened in the next few hours would haunt investigators for decades. Jennifer's mother, Carol, tried calling her that evening around 7. They always talked after dinner. Carol wanted to tell Jennifer about a sale at the department store. She thought Jennifer might want to go shopping on Saturday. The phone rang and rang. No answer. Carol wasn't too worried. Maybe she was in the shower. Maybe she'd run out for something. She tried again at 8. No answer. At 9. No answer. Now she was starting to feel uneasy. It wasn't like Jennifer not to call back. Carol phoned Jennifer's best friend, Lisa. Had she heard from Jennifer? No. Lisa tried calling too. Nothing. By 10 that night, Carol was genuinely worried. She called the Rockford Police Department at 10:43. She told them her daughter wasn't answering her phone, and this was completely unlike her. The dispatcher was polite, but not particularly concerned. Jennifer was an adult. She'd been missing for only a few hours. Maybe she went out with friends. Maybe she was on a date. Give it until morning. But Carol couldn't wait. She called her husband, Tom. They drove to Pinecrest together.
arrived around 11:15. Jennifer's car was in its assigned spot. The lights in her apartment were on. You could see the glow through the closed curtains. They went upstairs and knocked on the door. Hard. Called her name. Nothing. Silence. Tom tried the doorknob. Locked. They knocked again, banged on the door. Nothing. The elderly couple next door came out to see what the commotion was about. They hadn't heard anything unusual, hadn't seen Jennifer since early that afternoon. The man who lived on the other side wasn't home. Tom's heart was pounding. Every instinct told him something was terribly wrong.
By Friday morning, the Rockford Police Department had assigned Detective Michael Brennan to the case. 38 years old, 15 years on the force, 8 years in investigations. He'd worked missing persons before, runaways mostly, a few domestic situations, but something about this one bothered him from the start. Detective Brennan arrived at Pinecrest around 8 in the morning. He interviewed the family first. Carol and Tom were exhausted, hadn't slept. They told him everything they knew about Jennifer, her routine, her personality, her relationships. Brennan took detailed notes. He asked if Jennifer had mentioned anyone bothering her, following her, making her uncomfortable. Carol said no, nothing like that. He interviewed the neighbors next, Mrs. Kowalski, who'd waved to Jennifer the day before. She was elderly, sweet, heartbroken about the news. She repeated what she'd told the family. Saw Jennifer come home around 4. Didn't hear anything after that, but she admitted her hearing wasn't great, and she'd had the television on. The elderly couple next to Jennifer's apartment, the Pattersons, married 52 years. They'd been home all evening. Didn't hear any screaming or sounds of a struggle. No loud noises, no voices, nothing unusual at all. They'd watched Jeopardy and Wheel of Fortune, then gone to bed around 9:30. The neighbor on the other side, Unit 216, his name was Derek Foster, 42 years old, worked as a mechanic at a shop on 11th Street. He'd been at work until 6, then went to a bar with friends. Got home around midnight. Never saw Jennifer that day. Didn't know her well anyway. Just nodded hello when they passed in the parking lot. The young family downstairs, the Morales family, they had a 4-year-old.
They tested the ice cream, the spoon, looking for anything unusual, any trace of drugs or sedatives. Nothing. Just ice cream. The police interviewed Jennifer's co-workers at the hospital. Everyone said the same thing. Jennifer was wonderful, kind, professional, no conflicts with anyone, no angry patients or family members who'd threatened her, no workplace drama. They talked to her friends. Lisa broke down crying during the interview. She said Jennifer was like a sister to her. They'd known each other since high school. Jennifer didn't have enemies. Everyone loved her. She wasn't seeing anyone seriously. There was a guy she'd gone on a few dates with, but that had fizzled out months ago. His name was Brad. He worked at the bank. Police checked him out. He had an alibi, was out of town that week visiting his parents in Wisconsin. Detectives canvassed the entire apartment complex, knocked on every door. Did anyone see anything suspicious on Thursday evening? Any unfamiliar cars in the parking lot?
Any strangers walking around? Most people had seen nothing. A few mentioned seeing a dark-colored van parked near the back of the lot that afternoon, but couldn't remember details. No license plate, no idea if it was connected. They checked Jennifer's phone records. She'd made 2 calls that afternoon after getting home. One to her mother's house at 4:20. No answer. Carol had been running errands. One to her friend Lisa at 4:35. Talked for 7 minutes. Lisa said Jennifer sounded fine, totally normal. Said she was going to eat some ice cream and watch TV. They'd made plans to go shopping that weekend. That phone call ended at 4:42. Based on the melted ice cream and other evidence, detectives believe Jennifer disappeared sometime between 4:45 and 6 that evening, a window of about an hour and 15 minutes. But how? The police issued a press release on Saturday. Local news covered the story. Missing nurse, 23 years old, last seen Thursday evening. If anyone has information, please call the Rockford Police Department. Jennifer's photo was everywhere. The newspapers, the local TV stations. Her parents made a tearful plea for anyone who knew anything to come forward. Tips started coming in. Someone thought they saw a woman matching Jennifer's description at a gas station in Belvedere on Friday morning. Police checked it out. Wasn't her. Another caller said they'd seen Jennifer getting into a red truck on Alpine Road. Detectives tracked down the truck. It belonged to a plumber who'd been working in the area. He'd never seen Jennifer. Days turned into a week. Detective Brennan worked the case constantly, barely slept. He knew the first 48 hours were critical in missing persons cases. That window had closed, but he wasn't giving up. They looked at sex offenders in the area. Rockford had its share, men with histories of violence against women. Police interviewed them all. Most had alibis. A few were brought in for questioning. None of them knew Jennifer. None of them had any connection to Pinecrest Apartments. Brennan started to consider darker possibilities. What if this wasn't a stranger abduction? What if someone Jennifer knew had done this? Someone she'd let into her apartment willingly? Someone she trusted? But who? Her family was beyond suspicion. Her friends were cooperative and had alibis. Her co-workers checked out clean. The apartment manager, Harold Chen, was interviewed multiple times. He had master keys to all the units. Could he have let himself in? But he'd been in his apartment all evening with his wife. She confirmed it. And he had no motive, no connection to Jennifer beyond being her landlord.
Derek Foster, the neighbor in Unit 216, drew some attention. He'd been at a bar that evening, but bars are loud and crowded. Could anyone really confirm he was there the whole time? Detectives pressed him, checked his background. He'd been arrested once for drunk driving 5 years earlier. Nothing else. His friends confirmed he'd been at the bar. The bartender remembered him. Security cameras at the bar showed him there from 6:30 until 11:15. He couldn't have done it. 2 weeks passed. The case was all over the news. The community rallied. Volunteers organized search parties. They walked through the forest preserves, checked abandoned buildings, looked in dumpsters behind shopping centers. Nothing. No sign of Jennifer.
Carol Collins aged 10 years in 2 weeks. She stopped eating, stopped sleeping. She'd sit by the phone for hours, waiting for it to ring, hoping for news, any news. Tom tried to be strong for her, but he was breaking too. Their son, David, stopped going to school. The family was destroyed. A month in, Detective Brennan got a potential break. A woman called the tip line, said she'd been hiking in Rock Cut State Park and found a yellow T-shirt near one of the trails. Could it be Jennifer's? Police rushed to the scene, collected the shirt, sent it to the lab for testing. The wait for results was agonizing. 3 days, 4 days. Finally, the report came back. The shirt was Jennifer's size, same brand, but there was no way to confirm it was actually hers. Thousands of people owned yellow T-shirts. There was no blood on it, no DNA evidence. It had been exposed to weather and animals. The shirt could have been there for months or years, or it could have been discarded recently. No way to know. But it was something. Police searched the entire park, brought in cadaver dogs. The dogs indicated interest in a few areas, but found nothing. They dug, used ground-penetrating radar.
The 1990s passed. Jennifer had been gone for 5 years, then 10, then 15. The world changed around her frozen case file. The Soviet Union collapsed. The internet arrived. Cell phones became common. But Jennifer Collins remained missing, stuck in 1989. Detective Brennan retired in 2001. He'd never solved Jennifer's case, and it haunted him. On his last day, he met with Carol Collins, told her he was sorry. Sorry he couldn't bring her daughter home. Carol hugged him and thanked him for never giving up. She knew he'd tried everything. The case was reassigned to Detective Sarah Martinez, younger, 32 years old, fresh eyes. She'd heard about Jennifer Collins in the academy, the nurse who vanished from a locked apartment. No evidence, no witnesses, no leads. It was a legendary cold case in Rockford. Martinez pulled the file. 4 boxes of reports, photos, evidence logs. She read everything. Interviewed the family again. Carol was in her 60s now, still desperate for answers, still calling the police department every week. Martinez promised to do everything she could. But what could she do that hadn't been done? Martinez reviewed every tip that had come in over the years, hundreds of them. Most were dead ends, supposed psychics, people who dreamed about Jennifer, cranks who confessed to crimes they didn't commit. None of it led anywhere. She looked at the evidence again with modern forensic techniques in mind. The fingerprints collected from the apartment. Could they be run through newer databases? She submitted them. Got a few matches to Jennifer's friends and family, nothing suspicious. Some prints remained unidentified, but that wasn't unusual. Could be from the previous tenant, could be from anyone who'd been in the apartment over the years. DNA testing had advanced since 1989. Martinez wondered if there was biological evidence that could be retested. The hair samples from Jennifer's brush, fibers from the carpet, the spoon from the ice cream. She sent everything to the state crime lab for analysis. The results came back weeks later. Most of the samples were Jennifer's own DNA, or too degraded to analyze. But there was one interesting finding. A hair found on the carpet near the front door. It didn't belong to Jennifer, didn't match her family. The lab said it belonged to a male. They could establish a DNA profile. But without a suspect to compare it to, the profile just sat in the database. waiting. Years kept passing. 2005, 2010. Jennifer had been missing for over 20 years. Carol Collins was in her 70s now. Tom had passed away from a heart attack in 2008. David, Jennifer's brother, had moved to Arizona, started a family, but he thought about his sister every day. Carol
Detective
still lived.
Martinez couldn't believe what she was reading. James Sullivan had lived at Pinecrest in 1989? How had this not come up in the original investigation? She went back through the old files, searched for his name, found it. Sullivan had been interviewed, briefly, as part of the door-to-door canvassing. He'd told police he'd been at work on the day Jennifer disappeared, worked until 7, went straight home, didn't see or hear anything unusual. The detective who interviewed him had noted that Sullivan seemed cooperative, nothing suspicious, and that was it. He'd been crossed off the list. But now, 34 years later, he was back on it, because his DNA was a familial match to the hair found in Jennifer's apartment. That hair belonged to someone in his family tree, possibly him. Martinez needed to confirm it. She needed a direct DNA sample from James Sullivan, but she had to be careful. If she approached him directly, he might refuse, might destroy evidence, might run. She needed to do this quietly. She started surveillance. Sullivan still lived in Rockford. Different apartment now, on the west side of town. Lived alone. Divorced twice. No kids. He worked for a property management company. Did maintenance and repairs at various rental properties around the city. Martinez watched him for weeks, learned his routine. He went to work, came home, went to the same bar on Friday nights, bought groceries at the same store. He seemed ordinary, just another middle-aged guy living a quiet life. But maybe that was the point. Maybe that's how you hide in plain sight for 3 decades. Martinez needed a legal way to get his DNA. She couldn't just ask him. But if he discarded something in public, something with his DNA on it, she could collect it legally. It's called an abandoned DNA sample. Courts had ruled it was admissible. So Martinez waited, followed Sullivan to his favorite bar one Friday evening, watched through the window as he drank a beer, ate a burger, left cash on the bar, and walked out. Martinez waited 5 minutes, went inside. The bartender was clearing Sullivan's spot. Martinez showed her badge, asked if she could have the beer bottle before it went in the trash. The bartender shrugged and handed it over. Martinez sealed it in an evidence bag, sent it to the crime lab, requested expedited processing. Then she waited. 3 weeks that felt like 3 years. She didn't tell Carol Collins yet, didn't want to get her hopes up, not until she knew for sure. The results came back on Tuesday morning in June 2023. Martinez was at her desk when the email arrived. She opened it, started reading. Her hands began to shake. The DNA from the beer bottle was a match to the hair found in Jennifer Collins' apartment. Not a familial match, a direct match.
He wouldn't take no for an answer, made comments about her appearance, stood too close. Nothing overtly threatening, but something about him felt wrong. She'd been relieved when he quit. Martinez asked if Sullivan had ever mentioned a woman named Jennifer. Patricia didn't think so, but she said Sullivan talked about women a lot, about how they didn't appreciate nice guys, how they went for the wrong type. He had this bitterness to him, like the world owed him something. This was good. This was building a profile. But Martinez needed something concrete, something that would hold up in court beyond DNA that could potentially be explained away. She decided to bring Sullivan in for questioning, not under arrest, just for a voluntary interview. See what he said. See if he slipped up.
See if he'd changed his story from 1989. On June 28, 2023, Detective Martinez and her partner knocked on James Sullivan's door. He answered, looked older than his 58 years, thinning gray hair, deep lines around his eyes. He seemed surprised to see police officers. Martinez identified herself, said she was investigating a cold case from 1989, the disappearance of Jennifer Collins. Did he remember that case? Sullivan's face went pale. Yeah, he remembered. The nurse who went missing from Pinecrest. Terrible thing. He'd lived there at the time. Would he mind coming to the station to answer a few questions? Just routine. They were re-interviewing everyone who'd lived at the complex back then. Sullivan hesitated. She could see him thinking, calculating. Finally, he said sure. He'd help however he could. He grabbed his jacket and followed them to the car. At the station, Martinez led him to an interview room, offered him water, coffee. He declined, said he didn't understand why they needed to talk to him again. He'd already been interviewed back in '89. Martinez said they were just being thorough. New technology, new leads, going back over everything. She asked him to walk her through where he was on August 17, 1989. Sullivan said he'd been at work, then home. Same thing he'd said 34 years ago. He didn't know Jennifer Collins personally, never spoke to her, might have seen her around the complex, but that was it. Martinez asked if he'd ever been inside Jennifer's apartment, Unit 214. Sullivan said, no, never. Why would he be? Martinez let that sit for a moment. Then she told him they'd found DNA evidence, a hair, and that hair matched his DNA, so they knew he'd been in that apartment. Sullivan's expression changed. The color drained from his face completely. He looked trapped, panicked. Then he seemed to gather himself, tried to recover. He said that didn't make sense. He'd never been in her apartment. Maybe the DNA testing was wrong. Those tests weren't always accurate. He'd seen that on TV. Martinez said the test was very accurate. So if he'd been in that apartment, now was the time to tell her. If there was an innocent explanation, she wanted to hear it.
After the interview, Martinez knew she needed more evidence before making an arrest. She needed to find Jennifer, or at least prove that Sullivan had killed her. The DNA placed him in the apartment, but a good defense attorney could still create reasonable doubt. She started digging into Sullivan's life in the months after Jennifer disappeared. His employment records, his addresses, looking for patterns, looking for anything that might tell her where he'd taken Jennifer's body. In October 1989, 2 months after Jennifer vanished, Sullivan had moved out of Pinecrest, moved to a different apartment on the south side of Rockford. Then in November, he'd quit his job at the factory, started working for a construction company, demo and renovation work. Martinez found the name of the company, checked if they were still in business. They weren't, went under in 2003. But she tracked down the former owner, man named Gary Hutchins, retired now, living in Loves Park. She drove out to interview him, showed him a photo of James Sullivan, asked if he remembered this employee. Hutchins looked at the photo. Yeah, he remembered Sullivan, not fondly. Sullivan had been a decent worker, but there was something off about him. Kept to himself, had a temper. Hutchins had fired him after about 6 months, caught him stealing tools. Martinez asked what projects Sullivan had worked on, what job sites. Hutchins said Sullivan had worked on various residential renovations, tearing out walls, ripping up floors, hauling debris.
He'd also worked on a couple commercial jobs. Hutchins went to his garage and dug out old records, found a list of projects from late '89 and early '90. Martinez's eyes scanned the list. Most were houses, the north side. Martinez pulled out the old complex map. Building B was the middle building. The north side would be facing the parking lot, near where Jennifer's car had been parked, near where residents would walk to get to their apartments. She called in ground-penetrating radar specialists, applied for a warrant to excavate the property. The property management company fought it, didn't want construction crews tearing up their complex. But Martinez convinced a judge. The warrant was granted. On July 15, 2023, excavation began at Pinecrest Apartments. News crews showed up. The story was all over the media. Police searching for Jennifer Collins' remains after 34 years. Carol Collins was notified. She came to the complex, stood behind the police tape watching, praying. The crew started carefully removing concrete on the north side of Building B, beneath the foundation, in the fill dirt under where the original foundation had been. They dug slowly, methodically, using hand tools once they got close to where the radar had indicated possible remains. On the second day, they found something. Fabric. Deteriorated, but still recognizable. Gray sweatpants. And beneath the north side, Martinez pulled out the old complex map. Building B was the middle building. The north side would be facing the parking lot, near where Jennifer's car had been parked, near where residents would walk to get to their apartments. She called in ground-penetrating radar specialists, applied for a warrant to excavate the property. The property management company fought it, didn't want construction crews tearing up their complex, but Martinez convinced a judge. The warrant was granted. On July 15, 2023, excavation began at Pinecrest Apartments. News crews showed up. The story was all over the media. Police searching for Jennifer Collins' remains after 34 years. Carol Collins was notified. She came to the complex, stood behind the police tape, watching, praying. The crews started carefully removing concrete on the north side of Building B, beneath the foundation, in the fill dirt under where the original foundation had been. They dug slowly, methodically, using hand tools once they got close to where the radar had indicated possible remains. On the second day, they found something. Fabric. Deteriorated but still recognizable. Gray sweatpants. And beneath that, bones. Human bones. The excavation stopped. The forensic team took over. They worked for hours, carefully extracting the remains, documenting everything, taking hundreds of photos. The skeleton was mostly intact, buried in a shallow grave beneath where the foundation had been in 1989. With the remains, they found more clothing, a yellow t-shirt, white Reebok sneakers, exactly what Jennifer had been wearing when she disappeared. They found jewelry, a small gold cross on a chain that Carol later identified as the one Jennifer wore every day, a gift from her grandmother. The remains were sent to the medical examiner. Dental records confirmed what everyone already knew. This was Jennifer Marie Collins. She'd been here the whole time, buried beneath the apartment complex where she'd lived, where people had walked over her for 34 years.
The medical examiner determined cause of death: manual strangulation. The hyoid bone in her neck was fractured, consistent with someone choking her to death with their hands. She'd been killed quickly. Probably didn't suffer long. Small mercy. With Jennifer's body found, Martinez moved fast. She obtained an arrest warrant for James Patrick Sullivan. Murder in the first degree. On July 18, 2023, they took him into custody at his apartment. Sullivan didn't resist, didn't say anything, just put his hands behind his back and let them cuff him. He was transported to the Winnebago County Jail and held without bond. Martinez interviewed him again, this time with his court-appointed attorney present.
The trial of James Patrick Sullivan began in March 2024. Winnebago County Courthouse. The prosecution had an overwhelming case. Physical evidence, DNA, the confession. The jury was selected quickly. 8 women, 4 men. Carol Collins attended every day of the trial. Sat in the front row behind the prosecution. She was 78 years old now, frail, but determined to see this through, to be Jennifer's voice one last time. The prosecution laid out the case methodically. Detective Martinez testified about the investigation, the genetic genealogy breakthrough, the DNA match, the excavation, finding Jennifer's remains after 34 years. The medical examiner testified about cause of death, manual strangulation. Jennifer had fought for her life, had defensive wounds on her hands, broken fingernails from trying to fight off her attacker. Former neighbors testified. Patricia from Sullivan's old job testified about his creepy behavior, his obsession with women who rejected him, his bitterness. The defense tried to argue that the confession had been coerced, that Sullivan had been under duress, scared, confused, but the video of the confession showed otherwise. Sullivan had been calm, detailed, knew things only the killer would know. The defense tried to create doubt about the timeline, about whether Sullivan could have actually committed the crime, but the evidence was too strong. His DNA in the apartment, his access to the construction site, Jennifer's body exactly where he said he'd buried her. Sullivan himself didn't testify. His attorney advised against it, so the jury never heard directly from him except through his recorded confession. The trial lasted 3 weeks. The prosecution called 32 witnesses, presented hundreds of pieces of evidence. The defense called only 4 witnesses, character witnesses, who said Sullivan had been a quiet, normal guy. It wasn't enough. Closing arguments were emotional. The prosecutor spoke directly to the jury, told them about Jennifer, the young nurse who'd had her whole life ahead of her, who'd been murdered because she said no to a man who wouldn't accept rejection, who'd been buried like trash and forgotten while her killer walked free for 3 decades. The prosecutor said justice had been delayed, but it didn't have to be denied. They could give Jennifer's family the closure they'd waited 34 years for. They could hold James Sullivan accountable for what he'd done. The defense attorney did his best, argued that Sullivan had shown remorse, that he'd confessed, that he'd helped locate Jennifer's body, asked the jury to consider that Sullivan had been young when this happened, that people make terrible mistakes. That didn't excuse what he'd done, but it provided context. The jury deliberated for 6 hours, came back with a verdict on April 4, 2024. Guilty. Murder in the first degree. Carol Collins wept. Not from relief, exactly. Nothing could bring Jennifer back, but from knowing that finally, after all these years, her daughter's killer would be held accountable. Sentencing was scheduled for 6 weeks later. Illinois had abolished the death penalty in 2011, so Sullivan faced life in prison. The question was whether he'd be eligible for parole.
Jennifer Collins has been gone for 35 years now, but she's not forgotten. Her case changed how Rockford police handle missing persons investigations. They're more aggressive now, more thorough. They don't wait. They don't assume adults just wandered off. Her case also demonstrated the power of genetic genealogy, how DNA databases and family trees can solve cases that seem impossible. Since Jennifer's case was solved, Rockford police have reopened 3 other cold cases, submitted DNA for genealogy analysis, hoping for similar breakthroughs. Detective Sarah Martinez retired in 2024, 6 months after Sullivan's conviction. She'd spent 20 years in law enforcement, solved dozens of cases, but Jennifer's case was the one she'd always remember, the one that mattered most. She still visits Jennifer's grave sometimes, leaves flowers, tells her she didn't give up. Carol Collins passed away in December 2024, peacefully in her sleep. She was 79 years old. At her funeral, people said she'd held on just long enough to see justice for Jennifer, that she'd finally been able to let go. She was buried next to her daughter, together at last. David Collins still lives in Arizona. He started a foundation in Jennifer's name, the Jennifer Collins Foundation. It provides support to families of missing persons, helps fund searches, connects families with resources, keeps cases in the public eye. He says it's what Jennifer would have wanted, helping people, making a difference. James Sullivan is 60 years old now, incarcerated at Stateville. He'll die there. Some inmates have attacked him when they learned what he did, that he killed a nurse, a young woman who dedicated her life to helping others. Even criminals have a code. He violated it. His life in prison is not easy. Maybe that's justice too. The Pinecrest Apartments complex still stands. Building B was demolished in 2024. The property management company said it was for structural reasons, but everyone knew why. No one wanted to live above Jennifer's grave. The space is now a memorial garden. Benches, trees, flowers, a plaque honoring Jennifer's memory. This case haunts me for several reasons. Jennifer did nothing wrong.